This training video will address the crash location. Location is extremely important to a number of folks who need to know precisely where that crash occurred and how it's going to relate back to making roads safer.
Recognizing the DR3447 does require more work than previous versions, data analysts at CDOT are passionate about collecting the best data sets possible to inform strategic safety decisions.
What we're really looking for is a complete picture of how this crash happened.
And that picture, backed up by concrete data, can ultimately lead to safety improvements on Colorado roadways.
We have several examples in Denver where we have noted a high crash location, and we've been able to make some changes there through engineering to make it safer.
One example, the 20th Street Bridge heading to I-25. With thousands of people leaving the Rockies games, Denver PD noticed a high frequency of crashes involving the barrier and a sharp turn.
We had engineering come in and improve the signage, and that is adding chevrons, making it very visible that there is a sharp turn here, and it immediately reduced the crashes, and we had several fatal and serious injury crashes there, to almost none.
When filling out the crash form, there are 3 different ways to properly and precisely document the crash location.
We're going to use GPS coordinates, we're going to use the street location, and we're going to talk about highways, both state and interstate.
Let's start with the preferred method, latitude and longitude GPS coordinates.
Probably the easiest way to get it is just pull up Google Maps and drop a pin right where the crash occurred, and then copy and paste those lat and longs right into your crash report.
At CDOT, GPS coordinates in degrees are the preference, not degrees, minutes, and seconds. And with those coordinates, data analysts are encouraging officers to include even more details in the narrative.
What we're looking for is a GPS coordinate and location information that's then reiterated in the narrative so that we understand how we arrived at that location. That snapshot of being able to come into the crash is huge.
Street locations, intersections, and jurisdictions are also important to include and can sometimes be confusing. The crash location should be the first location in the crash sequence that resulted in injury, damage, or death.
Let's say there's a DUI driver who blows a stop sign and collides with another vehicle in an intersection, right? The DUI driver blew the stop sign,
which technically would be the first human contributing factor. However, the crash itself and where it is located and in which jurisdiction it falls to is where the first injury, damage, or death occurred.
In that intersection, if up to the stop sign is state patrols, but the intersection itself and the other road belong to another jurisdiction, that's that jurisdiction's to cover, even though the human contributing factor, him blowing through the stop sign, was on state patrols.
For my instruction, I tell my recruits, I want you to identify first as you locate this crash, who is the at-fault driver, because I want that street to be listed first.
Let's look at a specific intersection at Colorado Boulevard and Colfax Avenue, which are also both state highways. The more information an officer can include, the more beneficial the report will be when analyzed for crash trends.
We're going to simply put in that location, start with North Colorado Boulevard at East Colfax Avenue. So that properly delineates an intersection. If it happens prior to the intersection, it may be in the 1400 block of North Colorado Boulevard, and then we're going to have a certain amount of feet or miles south of Colfax Avenue. And that will be the 2 main ways to get a street.
State highways and interstates require additional accuracy.
If you're investigating a crash at an intersection, for example, you might look up at the signs at the intersection. They may say one thing, but then in reality that road that you thought was a particular road was actually a state highway, and you won't know that from the sign. It just depends on your knowledge of the area.
Including offsets from mile marker posts is also helpful to identify precise crash locations.
For example, if I'm on Interstate 25, I want to capture the milepost and the offset from the milepost. So milepost 240, about 0.5 miles north.
The importance of accuracy when identifying a crash location can save future lives.
As an officer, when you're able to identify safety issues and work with our stakeholders to implement change at those intersections, at those locations, and it starts to result in reduced crashes, reduced fatalities, reduced injuries, yeah, obviously you feel great at the end of the day knowing that you've prevented injuries and fatalities.
For more information on reporting a crash location, visit the Investigating Officer's Crash Reporting Manual.